when my husband casually said, "My friends think you're not remarkable enough for me." "I could do better," I simply replied. "Then go find better." That same day, I quietly canceled our plans, the gifts, everything. 2 weeks later, at 4 a.m., Ethan's closest friend called me in tears. "Please answer. Something happened tonight and it's about you." I woke up to Ethan packing a suitcase. "What are you doing?" I asked, still groggy, checking the clock. 6:15 in the morning. "I'm going to Mark's place for a few days." He didn't look at me, just kept folding shirts with aggressive precision. "I need space to think about our relationship, about whether this is really what I want." I sat up. "Whether what is what you want? This us?" He gestured vaguely at our bedroom, at me, at the 7 years of marriage contained in furniture and framed photos. "You're a great person, Claire, but my friends have been asking questions about why I'm with someone who doesn't really have ambitions, someone who's just comfortable, not impressive." The word landed like a slap. Ethan said, "Sienna said something last night that really stuck with me. She said, I was too remarkable to be with someone unremarkable. And I think she's right." He zipped the suitcase. "So, I'm going to take some time, figure out if I want to stay in this marriage or if I want to find someone more aligned with where my life is going." He walked toward the door, suitcase in hand. "Ethan," he said. He turned back, probably expecting tears, expecting me to beg him to stay. Before he left, I needed to tell him something about my work, about what I'd actually been doing for the last 3 years while he thought I was just comfortable and unremarkable. He set the suitcase down, annoyed. "Claire, this really isn't the time. My company was just acquired for $21 million, I said calmly, watching his face process information that didn't fit his narrative. "My share is $12.7 million. So yes, take your time at Mark's place. Think about whether you want to find someone more impressive. And while you're doing that, I'll be planning something special for your birthday. Don't worry, you and all your friends are invited." Ethan's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "Oh, and Ethan, the apartment lease is in my name, so take all the time you need. Just not here." The silence that followed was the most satisfying sound I'd heard in 7 years. He stood frozen in the doorway, suitcase handle gripped in one hand, his brain visibly trying to process what I'd just said. I could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. 12.7 million. Company acquisition. 3 years. Trying to reconcile the numbers with the woman he thought he knew. "You're lying," he said finally, his voice flat, defensive. "You don't have a company. You do freelance, consulting from the apartment." "I do crisis management consulting," I corrected. "For tech companies, data breaches, PR nightmares, executive scandals, the kind of disasters other firms won't touch." I reached for my phone on the nightstand, pulled up an email, and turned the screen toward him. "This is from Catalyst Ventures. The acquisition closed yesterday. Want to read the wire transfer confirmation?" He didn't move, didn't reach for the phone, just stared at me like I'd suddenly started speaking a language he didn't understand. "My business partner's name is Maya Chin. We started the firm 3 years ago, right around the time you got that promotion you were so proud of. Remember when you came home talking about your new title and your raise and how you'd finally made it? I was happy for you. I made your favorite dinner. I listened to you talk about your success for 2 hours. I never mentioned that I'd just signed our first 7-figure client. Why?" The word came out strangled. "Why wouldn't you tell me?" "Think about that," I said. "Really think about it. Because you were so proud of being the successful one, the breadwinner, the remarkable husband with the supportive wife. And I thought I was doing what a good partner did by letting you have that narrative. Making myself smaller so you could feel bigger felt like love." I got out of bed, walked past him to the closet, started pulling out clothes for the day. A simple black dress, professional, the kind of thing I wore to client meetings when I needed to project authority. "I supported you for 2 years after you finished grad school," I said, keeping my voice level. "While you were interning at firms that paid nothing I paid our rent. I paid our bills. I never mentioned it because I thought that's what partners did. Ethan was still standing in the doorway, pale now, the suitcase hanging forgotten in his hand. Last year, when his firm restructured and cut his salary, I covered the shortfall. He was embarrassed, so I didn't make a big deal about it. I quietly transferred money from my business account to our joint account, so he wouldn't have to worry. I pulled the dress off its hanger. The Tesla you've been test driving every weekend? I made the down payment last week. $20,000. Surprise, Claire. The apartment we live in, the lease is in my name. Has been since before we got married. You moved in with me, not the other way around. I turned to face him. The furniture, the art on the walls, the car he drives, I bought all of it. Not because I was keeping score, but because I thought we were building a life together. I thought we were partners. His face went from pale to gray. I didn't know. No, you didn't, I said, because you never asked. The words came out sharper than I'd intended. 7 years of suppressed frustration, finding an edge. In 7 years of marriage, you never once asked me what I was really working on, what I cared about, what I was building. You just assumed I was there to support your career, your dreams, your ambitions. The unremarkable wife with the remarkable husband. I walked past him into the bathroom and started brushing my teeth. Through the mirror, I could see him still standing there processing, trying to find his footing in a conversation that had completely escaped his control. I met you 9 years ago, I said around the toothbrush. At that coffee shop in Portland, you were a grad student with big dreams about architecture. You talked about buildings like they were living things. I fell hard. We got married at my parents' vineyard in Napa. Small ceremony, family and close friends. You cried during your vows. You promised to see me, really see me. For the first few years, I thought you did. I thought we were happy. I rinsed and set down the toothbrush. I met his eyes in the mirror. For a long time, I was very good at being the woman in the background. The steady presence that required no attention. I thought that's what you wanted. You never said you wanted more, Ethan said quietly. You should have asked, I replied. In 7 years, you should have wondered at least once if there was more to me than what you could see on the surface. He finally put down the suitcase and ran his hands through his hair. I don't understand. You had all this success, this company, this money. Why did you hide it? Why did you let me think I was unremarkable? I finished for him, because I thought you needed to be the successful one. I thought that's what you wanted. I paused, surprised by the realization even as the words left my mouth. Maybe I was testing you, seeing if you'd love me when you thought I was ordinary. The test results are in. You failed. You said Sienna told you I was unremarkable, I said. When was that conversation? Last night at dinner, he answered, uncomfortable. A bunch of us went out after work. Mark, Derek, Rishi. We're not in college, I interrupted. When you say it like that, it sounds like a hashtag. He bristled. We were talking about relationships, careers, life stuff. And Sienna. Sienna. I echoed. She just said she thought I could do better. That I was too accomplished to be with someone who didn't match my ambition. So this morning you woke up and packed a bag to go to Mark's place and think about whether you wanted to stay married to your unremarkable wife. Is that about right when you say it like that? How should I say it, Claire? He snapped. I walked back into the bedroom and started making the bed. You were leaving me, not with conversation or honesty or any attempt to work through whatever you were feeling. You were packing a suitcase at 6 a.m. and walking out to avoid the mess of an actual breakup. He winced. I was going to call you later. Explain everything properly. How generous, I said, smoothing the comforter, fluffing the pillows. You can explain everything properly right here. Tell me exactly what made you think I was unremarkable. I'm genuinely curious. Ethan shifted his weight, deeply uncomfortable now. It's not that you're unremarkable. It's just you don't have ambitions. You work from home. You don't have a title or a career path or a 7-figure income. Or a multi-million-dollar company. I interjected. Or clients in 6 countries. Or acquisition offers from 2 Fortune 500 companies. I sat down on the edge of the bed. Which part of that sounds unambitious to you? I didn't know about any of that because you never asked. 7 years, Ethan. You never asked. Morning light started to filter through the blinds, casting stripes across the bedroom floor. Somewhere outside, traffic was building, the city waking up with its ordinary problems. My problem was no longer ordinary. I want you to go to Mark's place, I said finally. Take your time thinking about whether I'm remarkable enough for you. And while you're doing that, I'm going to be doing something too. What? He asked. Planning your birthday party, I said, smiling but not warmly. You said your friends are all invited, right? Mark, Derek, Rishi, Sienna, the ones who think I'm unremarkable. He nodded slowly, wary now. Good, said. Because I already have a reservation at Atelier Rousseau for your birthday. I made it 4 months ago, Michelin-level tasting menu. 3-month wait list. I was going to surprise you with a private dinner. Just the 2 of us. I think I'll modify the reservation. Make it a group event. Something memorable. Claire, what are you planning? He asked. I pulled the black dress over my head and zipped it up. I'm planning to give you and your friends exactly what you want. The truth about who I really am. No more hiding. No more being unremarkable. I grabbed my laptop bag from the desk and my car keys from the dresser. The apartment lease is in my name. So take your suitcase and go to Mark's place. Take a week, 2 weeks, however long you need to decide if you want someone more impressive than me. But, Ethan, don't miss your birthday dinner. I promise it's going to be unforgettable. I drove to Maya's apartment in Burlingame, arriving just after 7:30. She lived on the 3rd floor of a converted Victorian with original hardwood and bay windows that caught the morning light. I'd barely knocked when she opened the door, already dressed, coffee in hand. Tell me everything, she said, pulling me inside. I collapsed onto her couch and did. The suitcase, the speech about being unremarkable, the way he'd looked at me when I told him about the acquisition, the invitation that would become the catalyst for something else entirely. Maya listened without interrupting, her expression sliding from shock to anger to something close to vindication. When I finished, she poured us both coffee and sat down across from me. 3 years, she said quietly. 3 years you've been hiding what we built because you were afraid of how he'd react. I wasn't afraid, I replied. Yes, you were, she said. You were terrified he'd feel diminished, that he'd be threatened, that he wouldn't be able to handle having a wife who was more successful than him. We'd met in college freshman year, randomly assigned as roommates in a dorm that smelled like ambition and instant coffee. She studied computer science. I studied business. After graduation, we drifted apart geographically, but stayed close. 3 years ago, over drinks in North Beach, she pitched the idea. Crisis management for tech companies, not PR fluff, but real, boots-on-the-ground crisis response when data breached or executives stumbled and reputations burned. Why us? I'd asked. Because we're good at putting out fires, she'd replied, grinning. Because we understand tech. And because no one expects 2 women to walk into a boardroom and fix what their overpaid consultants couldn't. She hadn't been wrong. We started small, fintech client with a data leak, 6 weeks of work, total containment, and the word spread. By year 1, revenue hit $800,000. By year 2, $2.3 million. Last year, $4.2 million. We were discreet, expensive, and devastatingly effective. 6 months ago, 2 Fortune 500 companies offered to acquire us. The numbers were staggering, but both offers required us to go public to stop hiding behind an LLC. I'd hesitated because going public would mean visibility, and I hadn't been ready to make my success public and disrupt Ethan's narrative about us. I delayed. I'd lied by omission. Maya's voice cut through the memory. Catalyst Ventures is ready to close, she said. 21 million for 60%. Your share after splitting with me and early investors, $12.7 million. Even hearing it in plain terms didn't make the sums feel real. But the press release was drafted, Jordan McNelt had the copy ready for TechCrunch and Forbes, and the plan was to go live the night of Ethan's birthday. If they run the story about invisible founders, two women who built an 8-figure company while no one watched, people will eat it up, Jordan had said when we briefed him. It has everything editors love. We had 3 days until the board meeting, 10 days until Ethan's birthday, 10 days until everyone who'd ever called me unremarkable would see the truth. I called Atelier Rousseau and modified the reservation from 2 to 12, requested the semi-private room with presentation capabilities and a projector. Colette, the maitre d', listened and promised discretion. By day 5, the panic set in. Please, Claire, just tell me what I can do to fix this, he texted. I know I messed up. We've been together 7 years. That has to count for something. I kept my phone on Do Not Disturb. Helen Voss, a family law attorney Maya recommended. She protects women's assets. She's ruthless. Advised me on documentation and asset protection. Our position was strong. The apartment was mine, acquired before marriage. The business had started with my savings, and I had bank records showing I'd covered household expenses for years. Helen warned me an aggressive attorney would argue I benefited from his support. She urged me to be ready. 3 days before the dinner, Jordan and I finalized the press release timeline. Business Story live at 11 p.m. Saturday night. I tested the projector at Atelier Rousseau, set up slides. Company logo, scope of services, revenue charts, client testimonials redacted, and finally the acquisition letterhead with the $21 million figure. On the night, I sat at the bar watching guests arrive. Mark and Derek, Ethan's old roommates, Rishi, a former colleague, Harper, a professional acquaintance, and Sienna, the woman who'd said I was unremarkable. Ethan walked in late, scanning the room. Confusion on his face when he saw his friends gathered in the private dining room. He followed me inside where I stood at the head of the table. I told them, calmly, that 2 weeks ago he had said I wasn't remarkable enough and that I'd invited the people who helped him come to that conclusion. I connected my laptop, launched the presentation, and as the logo filled the screen, I began to speak. For 3 years, Maya and I had been running a boutique crisis management firm for tech companies. Revenue slides, client case studies, then the acquisition announcement, Catalyst Ventures for $21 million. My share, $12.7 million. The room went quiet. I advanced slides showing bank transfers, the deposits I'd made into our joint account to cover shortfalls when Ethan's salary dipped, receipts proving I had paid rent during his unpaid internships, invoices for camera equipment, site redesigns, professional memberships, the invisible support I'd provided. Ethan's face drained color. Sienna began to cry. Mark buried his face. Rishi stared at his hands. I finished by raising a glass. To finding better, I said. May you all learn the difference between what's remarkable and what's merely visible. Then I walked out into the cool night and didn't look back. At 4:17 a.m., my phone rang. Sienna in tears. Something happened tonight, and it's about you, she said. They'd left him on the sidewalk, shaking. They'd all seen the press release that had gone live at 11 p.m., TechCrunch, Forbes, LinkedIn, my face and my company everywhere. When I finally checked my email that morning, the wire transfer had landed. The number in my bank account made me feel calm, not ecstatic. It wasn't about the money, it was about being seen. I slept for the first time in months. When I woke, Maya had interviews scheduled and Jordan handled press. Helen warned that Ethan might fight for compensation. He retained an aggressive lawyer. I didn't back down. I had documentation and clarity. The narrative had shifted. I was no longer invisible. 8 weeks later, the company offices were leased on the 43rd floor. Investors, clients, and media followed. I gave talks about invisibility as a strategy and taught other women how to stop making themselves small. Some called what I did revenge. I called it refusal to remain unseen. A month after the dinner, I stood at the window of our new office and read Ethan's email. A belated recognition. An apology that felt too late. I deleted it. This was the moment that changed everything. The rest of the story is not an ending, but a beginning. I drove back to my apartment in the Mission District after leaving Maya's place, the kind of crisp San Francisco morning where the fog clung low over the rooftops. Inside, everything looked the same as it always had. Same furniture, same framed photos on the wall, but nothing felt familiar anymore. It was like stepping into a version of my life that no longer fit. I set my laptop on the dining table and began organizing the stack of documents I'd pulled from my files. Partnership agreements, signed NDAs, tax returns, bank statements, rent receipts. Every piece of evidence that told the real story of my marriage. I created a timeline with clean slides. When the business started, where the funding came from, how Ethan had been supported financially every month without ever noticing. My phone buzzed. Ethan, asterisk, can we talk? I've been thinking about what you said, asterisk. I flipped the phone face down and kept working. Silence was its own kind of truth, and I wasn't going to break it to soothe the man who had packed a suitcase at dawn and told me he wasn't sure he wanted me anymore. A few minutes later, another message. Ethan, asterisk about the dinner, maybe we should cancel. This doesn't feel right, asterisk. He was nervous now, not remorseful, just afraid. I typed back 2 words. Dinner's happening. I didn't wait for a reply. Instead, I headed out for my appointment with Helen Boss, the attorney Maya had recommended. Her office overlooked the Embarcadero, all sharp lines and glass that reflected the gray San Francisco skyline. Helen scanned the documents I laid out on her desk, lifting an eyebrow as she flipped through each page. You've been thorough, she said. I run a crisis management firm, I replied. Preparation is my hobby. Helen explained how Ethan's attorney would try to twist the narrative, that he had supported me, that he had sacrificed for my career, that he deserved a share of everything I had built. The absurdity of it stung enough to make me laugh, but Helen didn't smile. He will make this ugly, she warned. Men who build their identity on being the successful one often fight hardest when that identity cracks. I'm prepared for ugly, I said. After the meeting, I headed to Soma to meet Jordan at a cafe packed with tech workers on laptops. He slid his MacBook across the table, showing me draft headlines, interview requests, podcast invitations, an avalanche of attention we'd spent years avoiding. TechCrunch wants first rights, he said. Forbes wants a quote. Entrepreneur wants a video segment. And Ethan is going to see all of it, I murmured. Claire, Jordan said, the entire country is going to see all of it. 3 days passed like that. Lawyers, PR strategy, documentation, silence between Ethan and me that grew heavier by the hour. He texted constantly. Day 4. Can we please talk like adults? Day 5. Asterisk Marcus thinks you're overreacting. We can fix this. Asterisk. Day 6. Asterisk I drove by the apartment. I know you're home. Are you okay? Please answer. Asterisk. I didn't. The silence was intentional. For 7 years, I'd made myself small so he could feel big. Now he could sit in the quiet he created. That night, after ignoring Ethan's 7th text in a row, I pulled up my reservation at Atelier Russo and changed everything. Party size, seating arrangement, menu, private dining room, AV setup. Colette, the maitre d', confirmed discreetly and professionally, never asking why I needed a projection screen for a birthday dinner. Before bed, I walked through the apartment touching things I had bought. The leather couch he bragged about to guests, the framed artwork he said made us look refined, the espresso machine he loved showing off. Every piece of it had been purchased during a time when he thought I was just a wife doing some light consulting. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Maya. Asterisk wire, transfer confirmed. Check your account, asterisk. I opened my banking app. There it was, $12.7 million. Not theoretical. Not a someday number. Real. Present. Mine. Strangely, I didn't feel elated. I felt something clearer, something quieter, like exhaling after holding my breath for years. It wasn't the money that changed everything. It was finally seeing myself without bending my shape around someone else's expectations. That night, I rehearsed the presentation again. Every slide, every fact, every receipt. For years, I'd done this work in boardrooms full of panicked CEOs. This would be easier. This time, the only person panicking would be Ethan. The morning of Ethan's birthday, I woke before dawn. The city was still quiet, the kind of deep San Francisco silence that only exists right before the fog lifts. I turned on my phone to check the time and saw a notification from my bank confirming the incoming wire had fully processed. It still didn't feel real, not the number itself, but the fact that it represented 3 years of work he never noticed and 7 years of potential he never bothered to look for. I showered, picked out the midnight blue silk dress I'd bought a week earlier, and let myself take in the reflection staring back at me. I looked exactly the same as always. Same brown eyes, same steady expression, but I felt different. Present, in a way I hadn't allowed myself to be in a long time. Visible to myself, if not yet to him. By late afternoon, Ethan still hadn't messaged again. Maybe he'd decided to show up wounded, contrite. Maybe rehearsing excuses. Maybe trying to convince himself that what happened tonight would be a small argument we could talk through. That was always the thing. He assumed the outcome before I ever spoke. He assumed control where he didn't have it. Around 7:30, I drove into North Beach and parked in the garage across from Atelier Rousseau. The cool evening air rolled in from the bay, carrying the scent of salt and car exhaust. I walked the 2 blocks to the restaurant, my heels clicking against the pavement, every step steady. Inside, warm lighting glowed over linen-draped tables and soft conversations. Colette met me near the entrance, elegant as always. "Ms. Ashford," she greeted. "Everything is prepared." She guided me to the bar where I could watch the entrance, unnoticed. A glass of sparkling water appeared in front of me. "For clarity," Colette murmured. I appreciated that she understood without asking. The first guests arrived at 7:53. Mark and Derek, both in suits, looking confused as they compared their phones. They glanced around the room until Colette approached and confirmed they were here for the Ashford birthday dinner. Confusion shifted to mild unease. They followed her toward the private dining room. A moment later came Rishi from Ethan's firm. Tall, polite, the kind of man who always dressed one level more formal than necessary. He looked equally puzzled and equally willing to follow the maitre d' without question. Then Harper appeared, heels sharp, posture sharper. She wasn't someone I knew well, but she'd always struck me as a person who saw more than she said. Tonight, her eyes flicked over the room like she was cross-referencing details. At exactly 8 o'clock, Sienna walked in. I recognized her instantly from the photos Ethan had shown me. Long blonde hair, green dress meant to dazzle, the kind of beauty that photographed effortlessly. She laughed as she greeted Mark and Derek, touching shoulders lightly, placing herself in the center of the group without appearing to try. Maybe she didn't have to try. Maybe people just moved around her. I watched her accept champagne from Colette and settle among the others. It was surreal, seeing her in person, the woman whose offhand comment had been enough to make my husband reevaluate an entire marriage. Apparently, 7 years of history mattered less to him than one sentence from her. I checked the time. 8:07. The door opened again. Ethan stepped in, scanning the room with a mix of confusion and expectation. He was wearing the charcoal suit I'd bought him, the one tailored precisely to him, the one he'd called the best thing he owned. His hair was styled, his shoes polished, his expression strangely hopeful, like he thought this would be some grand gesture of reconciliation. That hope flickered when he spotted his friends through the glass partition. I watched the confusion morph into worry, then into something else. Fear, maybe a recognition that the script he'd written in his head didn't match the scene in front of him. His eyes finally met mine. He froze. I stood up from the bar, smoothed my dress, and walked toward him. His breath hitched slightly as I approached. "Claire," he said, voice tight. "What's going on? Why are they all here?" "It's your birthday dinner," I said calmly. "I invited the people whose opinions matter most to you." "I thought you said we were going to talk," he murmured. "We are," I said. "In front of the people who helped you decide I wasn't remarkable enough." He swallowed hard. "Come on," I said softly. "Everyone's waiting." He followed me to the private dining room like a man approaching a cliff he didn't realize he'd been walking toward all along. The conversation inside quieted as we entered. Mark straightened. Derek looked anywhere but at me. Rishi folded his hands. Harper sat perfectly still. Sienna's smile faltered. "Thank you all for coming," I said. I wanted to celebrate Ethan with the people whose opinions shaped his view of our marriage. Ethan flinched. His friends exchanged glances. Colette placed 2 untouched champagne glasses at our seats. "Please," I said to Ethan. "Sit." He obeyed slowly, confusion and dread mixing on his face. The room went silent. I lifted my glass. "2 weeks ago," I began. Ethan told me his friends think I'm not remarkable enough for him, that he could do better. "Tonight, you're all here because you deserve to know exactly who I've been while you believed I was nobody." 12 pairs of eyes fixed on me. I set down the glass, walked to the small console table where my laptop waited, and connected it to the projector. The first slide filled the screen. "This is my company." And the air seemed to leave the room. A sharp collective inhale rippled through the room as the logo illuminated the screen behind me. Ashford, Chun Crisis Management. Sleek, minimal, unmistakably professional. The kind of logo you didn't design for a hobby or a side gig. The kind of logo that belonged to something real. "For the last 3 years," I said, keeping my voice steady, while Ethan was introducing me at parties as his wife, who does some consulting. My business partner, Maya, and I have been running a boutique crisis management firm for tech companies. I clicked to the next slide. Bullet points appeared: data breach containment, executive misconduct intervention, PR reversal strategies. I watched their faces as they read. "We handle disasters other firms are too scared to touch," I continued. "We've managed breaches affecting millions of users. We've navigated corporate scandals that would have ended companies. We've rewritten reputations." No one moved. The next slide displayed anonymized client case studies. More silence. "Last year," I said, letting the number land, "we billed $4.2 million. I clicked before anyone could process it. This year, we were on track for $6.8 million. Ethan's jaw shifted, but he didn't speak. His hands were clenched together, so tightly his knuckles were white. "And 6 months ago," I said, clicking again, "2 Fortune 500 companies approached us with acquisition offers." Mark flinched. Derek sank lower in his chair. Harper leaned forward, eyes fixed on the screen. Sienna stared at her champagne glass like it might explain something she'd missed. "This morning," I said, clicking again, "we finalized a deal." The Catalyst Ventures acquisition letter appeared on the screen. $21 million bolded in black. "My share of that," I added quietly, "is $12.7 million. The air went still, the kind of stillness that comes right before something shatters. I clicked again, but the money isn't the point. The slide changed to 2 bank accounts shown side by side, my business account and our joint account. Every deposit I had quietly made to cover Ethan's salary cuts. Every moment I protected his pride by pretending I wasn't the one keeping us afloat. "These transfers," I said, pointing to the amounts, covered the shortfall after Ethan's firm restructured and cut his salary. He was embarrassed, so I made sure he never felt the difference. Ethan's chest lifted sharply like he'd been punched. I clicked again. Receipts appeared. Rent payments from years earlier. "These," I said, "are the rent payments I covered for 2 years after Ethan finished grad school." His internships paid nothing. I supported us. Every month. No one spoke. Even the restaurant outside seemed to have gone quiet. I clicked again. A $15,000 bank transfer filled the screen. This was a loan for Ethan's architectural photography equipment, the gear he said would help him stand out in a competitive field. He told me he'd pay me back with his first real paycheck. That was 4 years ago. He closed his eyes, jaw tightening. Another click. The invoice for his $8,000 website redesign. And another. His $3,000 membership to the American Institute of Architects. And then slide after slide of expenses, professional events, networking dinners, software subscriptions, conference fees. Every dollar I'd invested not in my marriage, but in his image. I never mentioned any of this, I said, my voice still even, because I thought partnership meant supporting each other without keeping score. I let the silence sit there for a long moment. 7 years worth of silence, finally given shape. But looking at this now, I continued, scanning the room, I realized what I was actually doing was subsidizing his ego. I was funding the fiction that he was the successful one, the remarkable one, the one who married someone ordinary. Sienna covered her mouth with her hand. Tears were already gathering in her eyes. Marcus stared at the table like it had personally betrayed him. Derek wouldn't look at Ethan at all. Rishi sat utterly still. Harper watched Ethan with a look I couldn't decode, something between disappointment and disbelief. Ethan finally spoke, voice cracking. "Claire, why would you hide all this?" I looked at him, really looked, because you never asked. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His throat worked like he was trying to swallow something too large. I disconnected my laptop. The screen went blank, but the tension didn't. "For 7 years, I said quietly, I made myself small so you could feel big. But you didn't want a partner. You wanted an accessory. And when you decided I wasn't shiny enough for your friends, you packed a suitcase without even asking who I was." His face collapsed in on itself, a mixture of regret, realization, and a kind of fear I had never seen in him before. I lifted my champagne glass, raising it slightly, not a toast, not a celebration, but a conclusion. "So tonight," I said, "you all get to enjoy a $400 per person chef's tasting menu, courtesy of the unremarkable wife you thought wasn't worth paying attention to." Sienna broke. She started crying quietly. Harper drew in a sharp breath, like everything she'd ever assumed just rearranged itself. Ethan looked like he might be sick. "To finding better," I said softly. "For all of us." I took a sip, set my glass down, and walked out of the room, leaving Ethan and his friends sitting in the wreckage of their assumptions. I heard someone call my name, but I didn't turn back. I left them exactly where they needed to be. The moment I stepped out of the private dining room, the restaurant's soft murmur washed over me, the clinking of silverware, quiet conversations, the low hum of a place that had no idea a small-scale earthquake had just gone off behind a glass door. I didn't rush. I walked through Atelier Rousseau calmly, steadily, like a woman who had decided long ago exactly how this night would end. Outside, the San Francisco air hit my skin, cool, damp, alive with fog rolling in from the bay. I didn't look back at the windows of the private dining room. I didn't need to see the chaos I'd left behind to know it was unfolding exactly as it should. The city felt different tonight, or maybe I felt different in it. I walked the short distance to the parking structure, heels tapping a slow, deliberate rhythm. When I reached my car, I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, letting the silence fill the space where his voice used to live. I drove home on autopilot, the city lights blurring past like fragments of the life I was finally finishing. Back in the apartment, I didn't turn on any lights. I walked straight to the floor-to-ceiling windows and stood there, looking out at the skyline glowing against the night. The city felt awake in a way I hadn't been in years. My phone lit up on the counter. Incoming call. Unknown number, local area code. I should have ignored it. Instead, I answered. A woman's voice broke through the line, wrecked, trembling. Please, please don't hang up. Something happened tonight, and it's about you. I recognized her even before she said her name. It's Sienna. I leaned against the counter, watching the reflection of the lights bounce across the window glass. Why are you calling me at 4 a.m? She sobbed once, hard, and tried to get control of her voice. Everything fell apart after you left, she choked. We all followed Ethan out of the restaurant. He tried to pretend you were exaggerating, that the company wasn't really yours, that you were trying to make him look bad. I waited. I'd heard these defenses before, from clients, from executives, from people whose first instinct was always denial. But Harper, she sucked in a breath. Harper pulled up the press release. Claire, it's everywhere. It went live at 11. TechCrunch, Forbes, LinkedIn. Your picture, your partner, the entire acquisition. All of it. I closed my eyes. Jordan had executed the plan perfectly. Sienna kept talking, her voice cracking. We all just stood there, staring at him. At Ethan. He kept saying he didn't know, that you never told him. But then Marcus asked him something he couldn't answer. What was that? I asked. He asked Ethan if he had ever once, asked you what you were really working on. Sienna paused, breath hitching. And Ethan just stood there. He couldn't say anything. Nothing. I could almost see it. Them on the sidewalk outside Atelier Russo Ethan, unraveling, while the people he'd used as mirrors finally saw the truth. Sienna tried to steady her voice. Harper told him, she told him he'd been living off your money while telling everyone you were nobody. And she broke again. Claire, he broke down. Right there. On the sidewalk. Crying. Saying he didn't know. The quiet that followed was heavy, like something sinking to the bottom of a lake. Why are you telling me this? I finally asked. Because, she let out a shaky breath. Because we were wrong about you. All of us. The things we said, the things I said. I thought you were boring. I thought you were just there. And seeing what you built, seeing what you showed tonight. God, Claire, we were so unbelievably wrong. I didn't respond. I let her sit in the discomfort she'd never expected to feel. Is there any chance, she whispered, that you might forgive Ethan? That maybe you two could try again? He keeps texting all of us, saying he wants to fix it, that he understands now. No, I said immediately. She inhaled sharply. It was over, I continued, the moment he packed a suitcase at dawn and told me he might want someone better. Everything after that was just the part where he started learning the truth. She swallowed audibly. So it's really done. It was done before the presentation, I said quietly. Tonight just made it visible. There was a long silence, then a small, broken whisper. Do you hate us? For what we said? For judging you? No, I said. I don't hate any of you. She exhaled a soft, fragile relief. I just don't think about you at all. That hit harder than I expected. She made a small, wounded sound, then said she understood. She apologized again, messily, sincerely, and then I hung up before she could ask anything else. I set my phone face down and walked to the window again. The city was still awake, lights blinking like scattered thoughts across the night. All the noise from the restaurant, the confrontation, the tears, it felt far away now. Distant, irrelevant. For the first time in years, I felt something incredible. Empty, but in a good way. Like space had opened inside me where something new could finally grow. I went to bed and slept better than I had in months. I woke up late the next morning, sunlight pushing through the curtains I'd forgotten to close. For a moment, I lay still, letting the unfamiliar feelings settle. Rest, actual rest, not the exhausted collapse I'd grown used to. Then I noticed my phone vibrating, and vibrating, and vibrating. I reached for it and immediately regretted it. Messages flooded the screen, so many they stopped loading. Missed calls, texts, emails, social media notifications, news alerts. The world had found me overnight. The first email I opened was from Forbes. We'd like to invite you to appear on our Leadership Spotlight segment, another from TechCrunch. We want to feature your journey as a founder who built an 8-figure company under the radar. 3 podcast invites, 5 interview requests, a message from a literary agent, someone from NPR. My name was everywhere. I made coffee, sat at the counter, and pulled up my browser. The headlines hit me like tiny punches. The invisible CEO who built a fortune while her husband dismissed her. Tech genius called Unremarkable by husband goes viral after showing receipts. The $12.7 million bombshell at a San Francisco birthday dinner. Some articles were admiring. Others were vicious. Some cast me as a symbol of empowerment. Others painted me as calculating and cold. People I'd never met were debating whether I'd humiliated Ethan, whether I'd planned it for months, whether I was a hero or a monster. The comments were even worse. An ocean of strangers projecting their insecurities, their judgments, their experiences with marriage or success or resentment onto my life. I set the phone down and tried to breathe through the noise. A knock startled me. When I checked the peephole, I saw Maya holding 2 coffees and a bag of bagels from my favorite spot in the Mission. I figured you'd need backup, she said, stepping inside before I could fully open the door. She hugged me tightly, then pulled back to study my face. You saw the news? It's a lot. That's one way to put it, she said, setting everything on the counter. I've already given 3 interviews this morning. The story is everywhere, Claire. Everywhere. She wasn't exaggerating. She pulled out her phone and showed me Twitter, my name trending, clips of people reacting to the story, think pieces, memes, debates. All of it spinning out of control. I don't know how to feel, I admitted. You don't need to feel anything yet, she said. You just need to stay grounded. The internet burns fast and bright. By tomorrow, they'll be obsessed with something else. I laughed weakly. Tell that to Ethan. Maya's face hardened slightly, controlled, but unmistakably protective. What did he say? He hasn't called, I said, but I haven't checked my texts yet. Brace yourself, she warned. I finally opened the messages. There were 12 from him. The first few were angry. What the hell was that? You humiliated me. You planned this. You wanted to hurt me. Then they shifted. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you hide everything? You never gave me a chance to understand. I didn't know you were supporting us financially. I didn't know I was relying on you. And then, around 3 a.m., the tone changed again. Marcus asked if I ever asked about your dreams. I realized I never did. I see it now. I see how small I made you. His last message was the only one that felt honest. I'm sorry. Not because people know. Because I didn't see you when you were right in front of me. I stared at the screen for a long moment, waiting to feel something. Anger. Closure. Grief. All I felt was distance. I deleted the messages. Maya watched me quietly. You okay? I think so, I said. I think this is what moving on feels like. She nodded. Good. Because everything's about to get bigger. We spent the next hour drafting careful responses to the most important interview requests, coordinating with Jordan on a unified narrative, outlining talking points. The focus was on the business, not the marriage, not the drama, not the spectacle. We agreed to no interviews that tried to make it about revenge or humiliation. When Maya finally left for her next meeting, my apartment felt bigger than before. Not empty, open. I'd barely begun cleaning up when my phone rang again. It was Helen, my attorney. I answered immediately. What's wrong? Ethan retained counsel this morning, she said. And not just anyone. He hired Castellano. I exhaled slowly. Of course he did. He's preparing to claim that he supported you emotionally throughout your career and that he deserves compensation. I laughed, a small, incredulous sound. Emotionally, he didn't even know I had a career. I'm aware, Helen said, but that's the narrative he's going to push. Emotional labor, networking support, all the usual claims. I have documentation, I said. 7 years worth. And you'll need all of it, Helen replied. This won't be a quiet process. Castellano is known for media pressure tactics. He may leak details to paint Ethan as the victim. I looked out the window at the skyline, feeling strangely calm. Let him try, I said. I'm done staying quiet. Good, Helen said. Just remember, everything from this point will be public. You need to be ready for that. I am. After we hung up, my phone buzzed again. A text from Jordan. CNN wants you tomorrow morning. Live interview. Are you ready for television? I stared at my reflection in the dark screen of my TV. Hair unbrushed, wearing the same clothes from last night, messy and human and exhausted. No, I wasn't ready. But I typed back. Yes. Send me the details. If the world was watching, they were going to see the truth. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the swirl of headlines, messages, interview requests, and legal threats played behind my eyelids like an endless loop. By sunrise, I gave up trying. I stood at the window with a mug of black coffee, watching the San Francisco skyline turn gold as the sun broke over the bay. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about Ethan or Margaret or the polished facade of success I'd once felt pressured to build for someone else's comfort. My life was mine now. Jordan texted at 6:12 a.m. Car will be downstairs at 7:30 for makeup and pre-interview briefing. Casual power look. No black. No red. I smiled, grateful for her blunt efficiency. By 7:30 sharp, I stepped into the black SUV waiting outside. The driver greeted me by name, and I felt that small jolt again, the one that came with realizing people saw me now. They recognized me now. Not because of Ethan's last name, but because of mine. The studio was buzzing with morning energy, camera crews, producers, lighting techs, makeup artists. People rushing with purpose. No one looking at me like I didn't belong. A young producer approached with a headset around her neck. Claire Maddox? Welcome. We've got you in chair 3. She smiled. We're excited to have you. I followed her to the makeup room, where 2 artists worked efficiently, touching up concealer and smoothing hair until I looked like someone who had slept, someone ready for national television even though my insides were shaking. Jordan arrived minutes later, carrying a sleek binder and her usual unshakable calm. You'll be fine, she said, handing me a water bottle. You're not here to talk about Ethan. You're here to talk about your work, your company, your leadership. I know, I said, though my pulse disagreed. What Ethan does from here on, she continued, is irrelevant. You're playing a different game now. That grounded me. Minutes later, I was seated under bright studio lights across from the anchor, someone I'd watched for years on TV. She smiled warmly as the countdown started. 3, 2, 1. And suddenly millions of people were watching me. Joining us this morning is Claire Maddox, the anchor said, the entrepreneur whose name has dominated headlines this week. Claire, thank you for being here. Thank you for having me. Your story has captured the public's attention, she continued. A founder who built a multi-million-dollar tech company in private, while your own husband believed you were, well, unemployed. I kept my posture relaxed. I wasn't hiding, I said. I simply wasn't being seen. The anchor nodded slowly. Many people online say your story reflects a bigger issue. Women whose work, contributions, or ambitions are minimized within their relationships. Do you agree? I think, I said carefully, that people see what they want to see. And sometimes they choose not to look deeper because it's easier that way. And your husband, she asked gently, has he reached out since the news broke? It would have been easy to weaponize the truth. Instead, I took a breath. He has, I answered. But that chapter is closed. I hope he learns from this. We all should. The anchor smiled, powerfully said. 15 minutes later, the interview wrapped, and the moment I stepped off set, my phone erupted again, Messages from investors, journalists, former colleagues from past jobs I'd barely remembered, all reaching out with praise or curiosity or admiration. But there was one message I didn't expect. From a number I didn't recognize. I saw the interview. "I'm proud of you." It took me a moment to realize who it was. Ethan's father. A man who had quietly distanced himself years ago from Margaret's behavior and the toxicity she cultivated. He'd always been polite to me, always soft-spoken, always slightly sad-looking, as if he carried regrets he never spoke about. Before I could reply, another message came. "If you ever want to talk about any of this, I'm here. Margaret is spiraling. Ethan is struggling. But you handled yourself with grace." I let the phone rest on my knee, absorbing the weight of words that felt strangely healing. But the peace didn't last long. Jordan appeared at my side, expression tightened. "We need to talk." My stomach dropped. "What happened?" She handed me her phone. On the screen was a breaking news headline. Ethan Maddox claims ex-wife lied about marriage timeline. Files emergency motion alleging concealment. My jaw clenched. "He's doing this publicly?" "He's doing this stupidly," Jordan corrected. His attorney leaked the filing within minutes. "They're trying to paint you as deceptive, as someone who manipulated him." "They're calling me a fraud," I murmured. "No," Jordan said firmly. "They're trying to, but we're not letting that happen." I took a slow breath, grounding myself. "He picked a fight," I said finally, "with someone who's done staying quiet." Jordan nodded, proud. "Exactly." I opened my phone, scrolled past a dozen calls, and tapped the one I needed most. Helen answered on the second ring. I saw the filing. "Then you know," I said, steadying my voice. "We're not letting him get away with this." "I've already drafted our response," she said. "And Claire? This time we go on offense." I closed my eyes, inhaled deeply, and nodded to myself. "Do it." Helen moved fast. By noon she had filed a countermotion that read less like a legal document and more like a quiet, devastating dismantling of Ethan's claims. Every statement he made, she backed with receipts. Every accusation he tried to spin, she crushed with documented truth. By evening, several legal analysts were already commenting on the case online, noting how unusually weak Ethan's filing was and how thoroughly mine had countered it. Sympathy swung sharply in my direction, and Ethan's attempt to smear me publicly backfired almost instantly. But the real shift came 2 nights later. I was at home reviewing a contract when the door buzzer went off. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. Most unannounced visits lately were reporters, but something told me to check. When I looked through the peephole, I froze. Ethan stood there, not polished, not self-assured, not performing, just undone. Shoulders slumped, red-rimmed eyes. A man who looked like he hadn't slept in days. I opened the door only halfway. "What do you want?" He swallowed hard. "To talk." "You shouldn't be here," I said. "Your lawyer would call this a mistake." "I don't care what he calls it." His voice cracked, and for the first time in 9 years I saw him without his ego, without the armor, just a man confronting the emptiness he'd created. "Claire," he whispered, I don't know what to do." "That's not my problem." He nodded, absorbing the blow. "I filed the motion because I was angry," he admitted, "because I felt humiliated, because everything I thought I was supposed to be, provider, success, leader, just vanished. And it was my fault. I know that now." I said nothing. He took a shaky breath. "I read the court documents your lawyer filed. I saw all the receipts, the payments, the support, everything you did for me, things I never noticed." "You didn't want to notice." "I know." He ran both hands through his hair. "I didn't ask. I didn't listen. I didn't see you. I made you small because it made me feel big. And I don't know why I was like that. I hate who I was." For a moment, we just stood there, the silence thick between us. "I'm not here to ask you to come back," he said finally. I'm not stupid. I needed to say it. I needed you to hear me say it. What would you like me to say? I asked softly. That I forgive you? That we can be friends? That I'm proud of you for finally seeing what was always there? He flinched. No, he whispered. None of that. I just wanted to tell you I'm sorry. Not because of the backlash. Not because everyone knows. But because I finally understand what I lost. I exhaled slowly. Good. Then you should also understand this. His eyes lifted to meet mine. You didn't lose me because I became remarkable, I said. You lost me because you didn't care to notice I already was. He blinked rapidly, fighting emotion. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. And Ethan, you were right. That night you packed your suitcase. He swallowed. About what? You could do better. And so could I. He closed his eyes at the words, as if absorbing the final truth he'd never been ready to face. When he opened them again, there was no fight left. Just acceptance. Goodbye, Claire, he said quietly. Goodbye, Ethan. He turned and walked down the hallway. I didn't watch him go. I went inside and closed the door gently behind me, feeling something shift inside me, something final. The next morning, news outlets announced he had withdrawn his emergency motion. A brief statement from his attorney followed, saying my company and my achievements were entirely and unequivocally her own. The story finally began to fade from the headlines. A month later, on a cold January morning, the judge granted the divorce. No alimony, no payouts, no claims on my company. Clean, simple, final. That night, Maya and I celebrated with champagne on the rooftop of our new office building, the city glittering beneath us like a promise. You know, she said, raising her glass, for someone who spent years disappearing, you've become pretty impossible to ignore. I laughed, clinking my glass against hers. Visibility isn't so bad. What now? She asked. I looked out over the shimmering skyline, San Francisco alive and electric and full of possibilities. Now, I said with a smile, now I stop apologizing for being remarkable. And I meant it. My life was finally, undeniably, irrevocably mine. If this story of reclaiming your power had you hooked from start to finish, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Claire revealed those bank statements at the birthday dinner, showing who really funded everything. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more empowering stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.